The wind howled through the barren trees surrounding the ranch, carrying the eerie wails of a winter's night, and darkness descended swiftly. Anna was only illuminated by the faint radiance of a lantern that hung outside the barn in the midst of the pitch-black night. The turmoil within her was reflected in the distorted imprints left behind by the heavy stomping of her boots over the damp dirt. The air was so frigid that each breath she took transformed into a wisp of white vapor, but she did not pay attention to it. She was required to reach the stables. Right now. The barn's heavy wooden door creaked open, its prolonged sound reverberating like a groan of protest against her intrusion. Anna paused briefly, her breath held. She observed Stellan, the pitch-black horse, standing motionless in the barn's center, in the dim lantern light. However, something was amiss. Stellan did not approach her as he typically did, nor did he emit his customary welcoming neigh. Rather, his profound, dark eyes appeared to be affixed to a shadowy corner of the barn, as if there was an entity lurking there. A wave of unease rose in Anna's esophagus as she swallowed forcefully. She whispered Stellan, her voice strained with anxiety. But the horse did not respond, remaining motionless, his focus fixed on the darkness. Despite her trembling hand, Anna approached him with slow, cautious steps, reaching out to stroke his mane. She could detect the tension in his body, as if he were poised to flee, with his muscles tense. His gaze was fixed on the shadowy recess. She pursued his gaze, gazing into the shadows. The silence was interrupted by a mild rustling sound. Initially it was gentle, resembling the gentle murmur of wind as it passed through the floor. Anna instinctively retreated, sending a shiver down her spine. Is there an individual present? The vast barn swallowed up her small, trembling voice, which broke the stillness. There was no response. Suddenly, a hand emerged from the darkness, grasping the wooden beam of the barn. Anna nearly lost her footing as she stumbled backward and screamed. A figure emerged, its visage partially obscured by the dim light. Evelyn was the individual in question. However, her customary composed demeanor was absent. Her lips trembled as if she was attempting to speak but was unable to find the words, and her eyes were wide with distress. "Evelyn, what are you doing at this hour?" The voice of Anna was still trembling with fear as she demanded. Evelyn emerged from the shadows, her right hand grasping an object as if she were concealing it. Anna hesitated, divided between her inclination to confront the unknown and her apprehension regarding what she might discover. But before she could make a decision, the barn door, which had been ajar, abruptly slammed shut with a forceful bang. The women both jumped, their gazes directing toward the door. The lantern swayed violently on its perch, emitted chaotic patterns of light and shadow that appeared to dance in tandem with the increasing tension. "Who is present?" Anna screamed, her voice piercing the oppressive silence. No response was received for a brief period. Subsequently, footfall emanated from the barn's exterior. Slow. Intentional. They drew closer with each step, crunching against the gravel. Evelyn's posture was rigid and defensive as she stepped in front of Anna. She said with firmness, her voice changing to a tone of authority that Anna had never heard before. "Stay back. I will be responsible for this matter." Anna responded by nodding her head, "No. I am unable to remain in this position." "Stellan," Evelyn interrupted Anna, her eyes fixed on her with an intensity that quelled her protestations. "Anna, listen to me," she said. "I suggest that you refrain from becoming involved if the individual in question is who I believe they are." Anna was taken aback and she blinked. "Who do you believe it is?" "Evelyn, what are you discussing? Are you aware of the individuals who are present?" However, Evelyn declined to respond. Rather, she retreated to the door, her body tensed as the footfall ceased just beyond the threshold. The individual who was present was currently standing in silence just beyond the thin wooden barrier. Anna and Evelyn were frozen in position, their hearts pounding so loudly that it reverberated throughout the barn. The noise had ceased outside, but the air was dense with tension, almost suffocating. Anna could detect the tremor in her palms as she endeavored to maintain her balance. Evelyn's eyes were a peculiar combination of dread and an inexplicable emotion, as if she were concealing something that Anna was not intended to discover. Her gaze was piercing. Evelyn stated in a subdued but resolute voice, "We must exit the building. It is imperative that we are informed of their activities if they are present." Anna's respiration were rapid and infrequent, and she shook her head. A sudden, loud noise emanated from the stable. The sound caused both Anna and the stranger to freeze, and they both turned toward it. Stellan was the individual. The horse broke the oppressive silence of the night by emitting a powerful, penetrating whinny. Suddenly, the man's hold on Anna relaxed as a result of the intensity of the situation. Anna seized the opportunity and sprinted toward the stable, releasing herself. Stellan was in a state of agitation as she approached the door, slamming his muscular body against the wooden walls in an attempt to break free. His movements were wild and frenetic, as if he was attempting to protect her, and his eyes were ablaze with a fiery determination. Anna quickly closed the barn door behind her, bracing against it as she attempted to regain her composure. She glanced back, but the man had vanished into the darkness as if he had never existed. Anna's thorax heaved as adrenaline coursed through her veins as she collapsed to the ground. She murmured, "Evelyn," as tears streamed down her face. "What is your current location?" The weight of her despondency caused her voice to crack, but there was no response, and Evelyn was nowhere to be found. She remained in that position for a brief period. The storm of questions that swirled in Anna's consciousness was not illuminated by the faint glow of the lantern that was hung outside the barn. Her heart pounded as if it were attempting to escape her chest, and her breaths were short, shallow gasps. She struggled to regain her composure as she leaned against the barn door, but the image of the enigmatic man remained vividly in her consciousness, as if he were still standing directly behind her. Stellan's frantic screams echoed in the darkness of the barn, as he had not yet regained his composure. His muscles were taut, and his hoof struck the ground with restless force, as if he were attempting to alert her of a peril she could not yet see. His black eyes were glistening with fear. "Evelyn." Anna murmured the woman's name, her voice trembling, but only silence responded. She slid to the ground, embracing her knees, attempting to persuade herself that Evelyn was unharmed and that the man was merely a harmless drifter. However, she was aware that this was not accurate in her heart. She was unable to fully comprehend the situation, but she could sense it as acutely as the frigid breath of the wind. Something was occurring in this location. Her thoughts were interrupted by an additional sound, which abruptly returned her to the present. This time it emanated from the house's direction, where a faint radiance continued to emanate from the living room window. Her irises widened in terror as she abruptly turned her head. "Lucas!" She was compelled to take action when she considered her spouse. He may still be present. He may be able to assist her in locating Evelyn, or at the very least, confront the individual from behind. Anna was left with no alternative, despite the growing fissure between them. Her boots splashed through freezing puddles of dirt as she ran toward the house. The sensation of each stride was a sharp pain in her chest, a combination of exhaustion and apprehension regarding Evelyn's safety. Anna's heavy footfall reverberated throughout the eerily silent home as she nearly burst through the front door. She cried out, her voice strained from terror and exertion, "Lucas!" There was no response. The house was unusually silent, so still that she could hear the ticking of the clock in the living room. She hastily entered the living room, where a desk lamp illuminated the space with a warm radiance. Lucas's laptop was situated on the desk, its display ablaze with spreadsheets and diagrams. However, Lucas himself was not visible. "Lucas, what is your current location?" Anna's voice was now softer and weaker, as if the initial shout had depleted her vitality. She called again. She ascended the stairs, opening each door as she went, but he was nowhere to be found. Lucas was absent from his residence. Anna halted on the landing, her hands grasping the balustrade for support. She bowed her head in an effort to think more clearly. It is possible that Lucas had departed earlier, as he frequently did, without uttering a word. However, there was an unsettling quality to the residence. In addition to his absence, the atmosphere itself, the oppressive stillness, and the excessive silence created the impression that the house was concealing a secret, as if it were retaining its breath. Her eyes swept over the desk almost absent-mindedly as she returned to the living room until they landed on something. A photograph was placed face down on the surface. Her thorax contracted. Lucas did not typically keep family photographs on his desk. However, this particular one appeared to have been deliberately placed, as if it had been concealed by someone. She reached for it with trembling hands, flipping it over, and the sight almost caused her to drop it. Lucas was present in the photograph, however he was not accompanied by her. Evelyn stood beside him, her hand resting gently on his shoulder. Anna's face was scalded with heat, as if she had been struck. What was this? A message or an antiquated photograph? Her mind was in a state of agitation, as she searched for an explanation. The puzzle pieces began to fall into position, despite the fact that Evelyn had never mentioned any connection to Lucas. Evelyn's peculiar stillness, the cold expression she occasionally directed toward Lucas, and now this photograph. Anna's wrath was only moderated by the sharp, aching sting of betrayal as a wave of fury surged through her. She closely grasped the photograph, causing her knuckles to turn white. A sudden commotion paralyzed her as she was on the brink of storming out to confront Evelyn. The front door opened and subsequently closed. Anna's eyes were wide as she whirled around. Lucas entered the room, his expression betraying his astonishment at her presence, as she stood there, clutching the photograph. He hesitated briefly before proceeding toward her, his steps glacial and deliberate. "Anna." Lucas interrupted the silence with a voice that was both serene and laden with fatigue. "What are you doing with that photograph?" "Lucas!" Anna trembled with fury and the heartbreak that was squeezing her throat, causing her voice to waver. "Evelyn and you. What is this? This photograph. What is the significance of this?" Lucas observed her without responding as she held the photograph aloft, as if she were about to launch it at him. "Please respond." Anna's voice broke as she began to have tears fall down her face. "To you, who is she? What is the reason for her presence here? What is the reason for her comprehensive knowledge of me? Is she the reason for your estrangement from me?" Lucas sighed and raised his hand to his temple, as if to alleviate the burden of an unspoken truth. "Anna." His tone was tinged with a sense of fatigue which only served to exacerbate her wrath. "You are unable to comprehend," he stated. "Evelyn and we have a history, but it is not the one you may expect." "Is this not the case? Then provide me with an explanation." Anna approached him with her eyes flooded with tears, gazing into his face. "Describe the reason for her presence and the manner in which she communicates with me in a manner that you never do." Lucas maintained his silence for a brief period before exhaling once more. His shoulders were slightly sagging. He finally stated, "I hired Evelyn because I was confident that she could be of assistance to you." His eyes met hers. "Anna, I was aware that you were experiencing loneliness. I was aware that I had caused you harm. Evelyn was the sole individual I believed could assist you in regaining your identity." Stunned, Anna stood there. His words penetrated her heart like a blade. She repeated, her voice subdued and choked with emotion, "Help me. Have you never considered taking it upon yourself to assist me? What is the reason for her?" Anna came to the realization that she would never receive the response she desired when Lucas failed to respond. Lucas was left alone in the dim light as she stormed out of the home, clutching the photograph tightly in her hand without saying a word. The wind, which pierced through her coat and chilled her to the bone, howled outside. Anna pursued the farm where she had abandoned Stellan. However, upon her arrival, the barn door was wide open. She halted abruptly, her heart thundering in her chest. There was no one in the stable. Stellan was absent. Anna was halted in her tracks as she approached the barn door. which was now wide open. The wind howled in eerie murmurs, and the cold air enveloped her like a suffocating shroud. There was no one in the stable. Stellan, the horse she had come to believe comprehended her more than any other animal, was no longer present. She experienced a sudden onset of anxiety. Stellan would never spontaneously erupt, particularly not in his previous state of agitation. This was not an accident. "Stellan!" In the immense, dark expanse, Anna's voice echoed, but only the wind responded. She sprinted out of the barn, her eyes urgently searching the shadows for any indication of the horse. The dense forest that bordered the ranch was indicated by hoofprints in the moist earth, which led away from the barn. She hesitated for a moment, her legs quivering in response to the freezing cold and the fear that gripped her heart. However, she was aware that she could potentially lose Stellan indefinitely if she did not take action immediately. She followed the traces, each step more laborious than the last as her boots sank into the soft ground. The forest approached, its dense canopy absorbing the feeble moonlight, obscuring the path ahead in a thick, oppressive darkness. The leaves rustled above her, and the wind hissed through the trees like murmurs from an unseen world. However, Anna maintained her unwavering concentration and continued to advance. Stellan was required to be located. The eerie silence was interrupted by a gentle, weak whinny emanating from a distance. Anna's heart soared. Stellan was the individual. "Stellan!" Her voice was a blend of relief and desperation as she yelled out. She increased her tempo, disregarding the discomfort in her legs. The whinny returned and directed her to a small clearing in the forest. The scene before her was illuminated by the moonlight, which filtered through the trees and cast a faint ethereal radiance. Stellan was present. However, he was not the only one. Anna ceased in her tracks. A tall figure stood beside the horse with their back to her. The man's commanding presence continued to send a shiver down her spine, despite the dim light that was insufficient to reveal much. "Who is present?" Anna's voice was trembling with both terror and anger as she shouted. Slowly, the individual pivoted. It was not Lucas, nor was it the enigmatic individual she had encountered earlier. She was moved to shivers by the pale, almost spectral appearance of his visage in the moonlight. His eyes, which were unnaturally bright and frigid, fixed on hers with a tranquility that was anything but reassuring. His lips were adorned with a faint, enigmatic smile. However, he said nothing. Stellan stood motionless beside him, his demeanor hauntingly tranquil, as if the horse was already accustomed to the man's presence. "What is your name? What are you doing with Stellan?" Anna compelled herself to advance, despite her body's pleas to flee. The individual declined to respond. Rather, he gingerly stroked Stellan's mane, his movements being deliberate and almost tender. "Anna, you have progressed beyond my expectations." He finally spoke, his voice resonant and peculiar, as if he were fully aware of her. Anna halted, her breath catching. How did he acquire her name? She had never encountered him in her life. She took another tentative step forward, but the expression in his gaze halted her. His gaze was not only cold but also penetrating, as if he could see directly into her essence and reveal every secret she had ever attempted to conceal. "Stellan is my property." The man's voice was unaffected and steady, as if her presence were of no consequence. "He has consistently done so. You are merely passing through, a transient visitor in his life." False. Anna's eyes were filled with emotions of despair and frustration as her voice cracked. "Stellan does not belong to you. You are not entitled. He is the sole remaining member of my family." Her voice broke, and the sobs she had been suppressing uncontrollably flowed down her face. The individual did not respond. His expression was a combination of detachment and pity as he stood motionless. He spoke gently, his tone almost sympathetic. "Anna, do you not comprehend the situation? This was never about you. It pertains to the recollection of what you have forgotten and the escape you are evading." His words penetrated her like a blade. Anna was unable to respond as she stood immobilized. The man refocused his attention on Stellan and, with a delicate tug, began to guide the horse toward the forest's deeper shadows. "Please pause." Anna wailed and sprang forward, but her legs felt as though they were ensnared. The man's cryptic smile persisted as he cast one final gaze at her. "If you wish to locate Stellan," he advised, "you must first locate yourself. Failing that, all will be lost." Then Stellan and he vanished into the darkness, disappearing like a specter. Anna's chest heaved as her heart pounded against her ribcage, and she collapsed to her knees. Her mind was awash with inquiries. How did he acquire her name? Who was he? Where had he taken Stellan? The wind, which whipped around her like murmurs of warning, reminded her that everything was slipping out of her control as she sat there in the cold. Anna found that everything had changed when she eventually returned to the ranch, her legs barely capable of supporting her. Lucas was nowhere to be found, and the home was shrouded in darkness, and the barn remained empty. However, upon entering the living room, her gaze was drawn to the desk. The photograph of Lucas and Evelyn was substituted by another. This time, the photograph depicted her and Stellan. However, something was amiss. The photograph depicted her face as vacant, her eyes hollow and lifeless, while Stellan's gaze was sharp and penetrating, gazing directly at her as if to convey a message. Anna's hands trembled as she lifted the photograph, and she nearly dropped it due to the tremor in her fingertips. She flipped it over and inscribed the words, "Find the truth within yourself before it's too late," in jagged penmanship on the back. Anna's breath caught in her throat as she staggered backward. I had the sensation that the walls of the home were closing in on her. The silence was not merely tranquil, it was oppressive and suffocating. She abruptly turned, her intuition warning her that someone or something was observing her. Anna came to the realization that the darkness that enveloped her was not merely the absence of light. It was a living entity that was devouring everything she had previously believed to be under her control. The story's just beginning. There are more broken hearts and dark secrets ahead. Hit like, subscribe, and keep exploring with Love Missteps.